3 days. 3 days locked in the pantry of my own house, surrounded by cans of black beans and bags of rice, drinking water from the kitchen faucet when I could reach it with my shaking hands. My son, Robert, told the neighbors I was traveling. When they finally got me out and I arrived at the hospital, with cracked lips and a dehydrated body, he leaned toward me on that cold bed and whispered in my ear, "If you tell anyone the truth, Mum, I'll send you straight to the nursing home. And there, no one will listen to your complaints." I stayed silent. But what Robert didn't know is that the doctor had heard everything. My name is Elizabeth Sterling. I am 60 years old, and for a long time, I believed a mother's love could endure everything, forgive everything, silence everything. I was wrong. This story begins 6 months earlier, on an October afternoon that smelled of warm apple cider and pumpkin pie. I was in my kitchen, that kitchen which had witnessed so many family dinners, so many laughs. My house, the house that my late husband, Richard, and I built with so much effort during 30 years of marriage. Robert arrived that afternoon with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mum," he said while pouring himself a cup of coffee into my favorite mug, the porcelain one, with blue flowers that Richard gave me on our anniversary. "We need to talk about your future." I was preparing candied sweet potatoes. I remember my hands kept moving the wooden spoon while he spoke. "You can't live alone anymore," he continued. "You're getting older. You forget things. The other day you left the stove on." That was a lie. I had never left the stove on. But Robert said it with such certainty, with such feigned concern in his voice, that for a moment, even I doubted my memory. "Maybe you should consider selling the house," he suggested, looking at the walls as if he were already calculating what they were worth. "I could help you manage the money. You know you're not good with numbers." At that moment, I should have seen the trap. I should have realized that this conversation wasn't about my well-being, but about something much darker. But a mother always wants to believe that her son is protecting her. Richard had died 2 years ago, a heart attack while he slept, painless, without goodbyes. He left me this house, fully paid for, a modest but decent pension, and some savings we had kept our entire lives. We weren't rich, but I had enough to live peacefully for the rest of my days. Robert knew that, and that was the beginning of everything. That night, when he left, I stayed, looking at my porcelain mug with blue flowers. It was empty, but at the bottom, there were remnants of the coffee Robert had drunk, a dark stain like a shadow. I didn't know that mug would become a silent witness to my own story. Have you ever trusted someone you loved so much that you stopped seeing the signs? Have you given everything only to discover that the one you loved most was the one who least deserved it? If you have ever felt that way, tell me your story in the comments. I want to read them because sometimes sharing our pain is the first step toward healing. Voice cracks slightly. What happened next? What Robert did in the following months? I still find hard to believe. But before I tell you how I ended up locked in that pantry, I need you to understand who I was before everything fell apart. Because this story is not just about what they did to me. It's about what I found when I hit rock bottom, and about how justice sometimes arrives in the most unexpected ways. Before everything broke, my life was simple but beautiful. I got up every morning at 6 o'clock, when the sun was just beginning to light up my backyard. The first thing I did was open the kitchen window to let in the fresh air, that October air that in Philadelphia smells like damp earth and the last fallen leaves. I made coffee in the old coffee maker Richard gave me when we got married. I never wanted to change it for a new one, even though Robert insisted I buy one of those modern ones that use pods. For me, coffee had to be made slowly with patience, feeling the aroma that filled the entire kitchen. My routine was sacred. After coffee, I watered the garden plants. I had red geraniums in clay pots, a climbing rose that grew up the patio wall, and a rose bush that Richard had planted the year Robert was born. Every morning, while watering those plants, I talked to Richard as if he were still there with me. Look, my love, the rose bush is producing new flowers. Do you remember when we planted it? Robert was just 2 years old and wanted to help you dig the hole. Sometimes the neighbours heard me talking to myself and smiled with tenderness. Mrs. Henderson, who lived next door, always told me it was normal, that she also talked to her late husband every morning. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I went to the market. I walked 8 blocks to the Reading Terminal Market, where I knew all the vendors by name. Mr. Johnson saved the ripest tomatoes for my sauce. Mrs. Kelly set aside the creamiest farmer's cheese for me, and Mr. Green, the florist, always gave me a small bouquet of carnations. "To brighten your house, Mrs. Sterling," he would say with that toothless smile he had. My house wasn't big, but it was mine. It was the fruit of 30 years of work by Richard as an accountant at a construction company, and my own years as an elementary school teacher. It had cost us so much to buy it, so much to fix it up, so much to fill it with memories. The living room had a wine-coloured sofa that we bought on an installment plan, and on the wall hung photographs of our life together. Richard and I on our wedding day, with my simple white dress and his borrowed suit. Robert as a baby in his father's arms. Robert at his college graduation, with his engineering degree that cost us so much to pay for. That graduation photo filled me with pride every time I saw it. My son, the engineer, my son who had achieved what neither Richard nor I could reach, a professional career, a college degree. Richard died the month after that graduation, as if he had waited to see his son become a professional so he could leave in peace. After Richard's death, Robert came to visit me every 2 weeks, always on Sundays. He arrived around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just as I finished cooking. I prepared his favourite dishes: roasted chicken, macaroni and cheese, green bean casserole. He ate heartily and told me things about his job, his projects. I listened happily, feeling useful, feeling needed. "Nobody cooks like you, Mum," he would say while serving himself a second helping. "I haven't tasted chicken and rice like yours in any restaurant." Those words filled my heart. After eating, we would sit in the living room to drink coffee in the porcelain cups Richard and I had received as a wedding gift. There were 6 cups, decorated with delicate blue flowers. Only 4 were left now. 2 had broken over the years. My favourite cup was the smallest of all, with the handle slightly crooked because Robert had dropped it when he was 5 years old. Richard had glued it so carefully that the crack was almost unnoticeable. That imperfection made it even more special to me. On Sunday afternoons, after Robert's visit, I slowly washed the dishes, put the leftovers in the refrigerator to eat during the week, and sat on the patio to watch the afternoon fade. Mrs. Henderson would sometimes look over the fence that separated our houses. "How are you, Mrs. Sterling? Did Robert come by?" "Yes, Sally. He was with me all afternoon. He ate like a blessed man." "That's good that you have such an attentive son. Not all of us are that lucky." I nodded with pride. Yes, I was lucky. My son visited me, called me on the phone during the week, worried about me. Or so I thought. That October afternoon, when Robert told me we had to talk about my future, something in his tone of voice made me uncomfortable, but I let it pass. I told myself it was his way of protecting me, of looking after me. I told myself that a mother shouldn't distrust her son. That night, after Robert left, I sat in the kitchen for hours, drinking chamomile tea in my porcelain mug with blue flowers. The kitchen was silent. Only the tick-tock of the wall clock that Richard had bought in New Jersey during one of our few trips together could be heard. I looked around. The pale yellow painted walls, the subway tiles we had put up with so much effort, the wooden cabinet where I kept the dishes and glasses, the round table where we had eaten family dinners for so many years. Everything was in its place. Everything was clean, tidy, well kept. Why did Robert say I couldn't live alone anymore? I got up and checked the stove for the third time that night, just to be completely sure it was off. It was, as it always was. I went to sleep with a strange feeling in my chest, as if something had moved inside my house without me noticing it, as if someone had left a door ajar and now a cold wind was coming in that shouldn't be there. That night, I dreamed of Richard. We were in the garden, planting the rose bush together. But in the dream, when we dug the earth, we found something buried. A box. Richard opened it, and inside there was only darkness. I woke up startled at 3 o'clock in the morning, with my heart racing. The house was silent, too silent, and for the first time in 2 years, since Richard's death, I felt fear in my own house. Robert's visits started to change. He no longer came only on Sundays. Now he appeared during the week, without warning, ringing the doorbell at 10 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the evening, always with that same smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I was just passing by, Mum. I wanted to see how you were doing." At first I was happy to see him. I thought maybe he felt lonely after breaking up with his girlfriend a few months ago. Maybe he missed me more. Maybe he needed his mother's company. But soon I realized something else was happening. Robert started checking things. He opened the kitchen drawers as if he were looking for something. He looked at the papers I left on the table. He asked about documents I didn't even know existed. "Mum, where do you keep the house deed?" "In the filing cabinet in Richard's room, as always." "And the bank statements? Do you have them organized?" "Robert, why do you need to know that?" "Well, I'm worried that you don't have everything in order, Mum. At your age, you have to be more careful with important papers." At my age, as if being 60 years old made me an invalid, incapable of taking care of my own documents. One afternoon he arrived with a folder full of papers. "Mum, I made an appointment with a lawyer friend of mine. He says it would be good for you to make a will, so that everything is clear when when you're no longer here." I sat on the living room sofa, feeling my skin crawl. It wasn't the idea of the will that made me uncomfortable. Richard and I had talked about it many times. What made me uncomfortable was the urgency in Robert's voice, the way he looked at me as if he were already counting the days. "Robert, I'm not in a hurry to make a will. I feel fine, thank goodness." "But Mum, nobody knows when something is going to happen. Dad didn't think he was going to die so soon either." That phrase hurt me like a slap. Richard had died at 62, just 2 years older than I was now. Was Robert expecting me to die soon too? "Besides," he continued, sitting next to me and taking my hand with a softness that felt fake, "if you make the will now, I can help you decide how to distribute everything. We don't want there to be problems later." "Problems? Robert, you're my only son. Everything I have is yours anyway. There's nothing to distribute." "But it has to be done legally, Mum. It has to be official." That night, after he left, I kept thinking about that conversation. Something didn't add up. Robert had never shown so much interest in legal matters or my financial well-being. When Richard died, he didn't even accompany me to do the pension paperwork. I had to go alone, with Mrs. Henderson, to all the government offices. And now, suddenly, he wanted to help me with wills and documents. The following days were strange. Robert started saying things that made me doubt myself. "Mum, Mrs. Henderson called me yesterday. She says she saw you watering the plants at 2 o'clock in the morning. Is that true? What? No, Robert. I never water the plants at that hour. Well, she says yes. She saw you in the garden, in your pajamas, with the hose. I knew that was a lie, but the way Robert said it, with that feigned concern in his voice, made me doubt. What if I had gone out and didn't remember? What if I was losing my memory like he said? He also told me that I left the front door open all night last Tuesday. That's not true either, Robert. Mum, I'm not scolding you. I'm just worried about you. These things happen when you get older. It's not your fault, but I knew I closed the door properly. Every night before going to bed, I turned the key twice and put the security chain on. It was a habit Richard had taught me, and I had never stopped doing it. However, Robert's words stayed in my head like poisonous seeds. They made me question my own memories, my own actions. One morning, while making coffee, I realized that my porcelain mug with blue flowers wasn't on the shelf where I always kept it. I looked for it all over the kitchen. Finally, I found it inside the oven. How had it gotten there? I never kept mugs in the oven. I sat at the kitchen table, holding the mug in my shaking hands, trying to remember if it had been me who put it there. But I couldn't remember. My mind was blank. Maybe Robert was right. Maybe I really was starting to forget things. That afternoon, when Robert came to visit, I told him about the mug. I found my mug inside the oven. I don't know how it got there. Instead of being surprised, Robert nodded slowly, as if that only confirmed something he already knew. See, Mum, that's why I worry. These things are signs. You should go to the doctor. Maybe you need medication for your memory. I don't need medication, Robert. It was just once. But it can get worse. And if it gets worse, you won't be able to live alone. You're going to need help. That word, help, the way he pronounced it, gave me goosebumps. The following weeks, I started to feel observed in my own house. Robert appeared without warning at any hour. He would ring the doorbell, and when I opened the door, he would look me up and down, as if he were evaluating me. Were you sleeping, Mum? It's 10 o'clock in the morning. No, I was reading in my room. Oh, I thought maybe, you felt sick. He started bringing prepared food when he came to visit. Containers with stews that he said he had bought at a restaurant near his office. So you don't have to cook, Mum. You shouldn't be standing in the kitchen for so long anymore. I accepted the food so as not to hurt his feelings, but deep down, it hurt. Cooking was one of the few things that still made me feel useful, that still connected me to Richard, to the years when we were a family. One night, while heating up one of the stews Robert had brought, I felt a strange, bitter taste, as if the food were spoiled. I spat it out in the sink and threw the entire container in the trash. The next day, I felt dizzy all morning. I thought maybe it was my blood pressure, or that I hadn't slept well. But when Robert arrived that afternoon and saw me pale, he smiled in a way I didn't like. See, Mum, you're not well. You need someone to take care of you. Mrs. Henderson started acting differently toward me too. She didn't look over the fence as much. She no longer greeted me with the same warmth as before. When I saw her on the street, she would look away. One day I found her at the market and approached to greet her. Sally, how have you been? We hardly talk anymore. She looked at me with a strange expression, a mix of pity and discomfort. Oh, Mrs. Sterling, your son asked me to watch you. He says you've been doing weird things, going out in the middle of the night, leaving the doors open. My blood ran cold. Robert asked you to watch me. Yes. He told me to let him know if I saw anything strange, that you're mentally ill, but you don't want to accept it. I left there without saying anything else. I walked the 8 blocks back to my house without seeing anything, without feeling anything, only with a ringing in my ears that wouldn't let me think. When I arrived, I locked the door and sat on the living room sofa, looking at the photographs on the wall. Richard smiling, Robert as a baby in his father's arms, Robert at his graduation. When had my son become a stranger? I took my porcelain mug with blue flowers and poured myself some coffee, even though it was 6 o'clock in the evening and I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. I needed something that would make me feel normal, something that would remind me who I was before all this started. The mug was warm in my hands. The crack Richard had glued so many years ago was still there, barely visible, but resistant. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake in the darkness of my room, listening to the sounds of the house, the tick-tock of the clock, the wind moving the branches of the rose bush in the garden, and something else, a creak that came from the living room. I got up slowly with my heart beating hard in my chest. I walked down the dark hallway to the living room. The front door was ajar. I was sure, completely sure, that I had locked it and put the security chain on before going to bed. I quickly closed the door and turned the key with shaking hands. I checked all the windows in the house. They were all closed. I checked the interior doors. Everything was closed. But that door had been open. I wasn't imagining it. Someone had opened it from the inside. Or maybe there was someone else in my house. The days became a fog of doubt and confusion. I started writing everything down in an old notebook I found on Richard's desk. The time I got up, if I had watered the plants, if I had locked the door, every small detail of my day, because I no longer trusted my own memory. But every time I wrote in that notebook, I felt ridiculous, as if I were a paranoid old woman who needed proof of her own existence. Robert kept appearing without warning. Now he had a key to my house hanging from his keychain. "When did I give you a copy of the key?" I asked him the first time I saw him use it to enter without ringing the doorbell. "You gave it to me 2 weeks ago, Mum. Don't you remember? You told me it was better for me to have a copy in case something happened." I didn't remember giving him any key, but I no longer knew whether to trust my memory or his words. One afternoon, he arrived with a man who introduced himself as Attorney Mr. Smith, the lawyer Robert had told me about. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Sterling. Your son has told me a lot about you. I've come to help you with some important documents." Robert led me to the living room sofa, as if I were a small child who needed to be guided. The attorney opened his briefcase and took out several papers. "Here is the will your son asked me to prepare. It's very simple. It basically establishes that, in the event of your death, all your assets automatically pass to your son, Robert. It also includes a power of attorney so he can manage your bank accounts and your properties in case you become incapacitated." The word incapacitated echoed in my head like a church bell. Incapacitated? But I'm fine. The attorney smiled at me condescendingly. "It's just a precaution, Ma'am. At your age, you never know when you might need help." At my age? I looked at the papers. There were so many pages, so many legal words I didn't understand. Terms like usufruct, revocation clause, principal, and agent. "I don't know if I should sign this now. I'd like to think about it." Robert sat next to me and took my hand. "Mum, the attorney came all the way here just to help you. It's not fair to make him wait. Besides, this is for your own good. If something happens to you and you don't have these documents in order, it's going to be a huge problem. Do you remember what happened to Mrs. Miller when she died? Her children were fighting over the inheritance for years. But I only have one son. There won't be any fight." "Even so, Mum, things have to be done properly, legally." The attorney pushed a pen toward me. "Where do I need to sign?" Robert pointed to several places on the documents. There were so many, 5, 6, maybe 7 different places where I had to put my name. I signed. I signed because I didn't know what else to do. I signed because my son was looking at me with that barely contained expression of impatience. I signed because the attorney already had his pen in his hand, ready to validate my signature as a witness. When I finished, the attorney put the papers in his briefcase with a speed that seemed suspicious. Perfect. Everything is in order. Your son now has the legal authority to help you with any financial or legal procedure you need. After they left, I sat on the sofa for hours, looking at my hands. The same hands that had signed those papers. The same hands that had cooked thousands of meals for my family. The same hands that had held Robert when he was a baby. What had I done? That night, as I was making tea in the kitchen, I saw my porcelain mug with blue flowers on the shelf. I picked it up and held it against the light. The crack Richard had glued was still there, thin but visible. A line that divided the mug into 2 parts that had been separated and then joined again. I wondered if I was also broken, if something inside me had shattered without me realizing it. The following days were even worse. Robert started arriving with correspondence from my bank. "Mum, they've been sending these statements. Look, it says here that your balance has dropped a lot in the last few months. What have you been spending on?" I took the papers and checked them. It was true. There were large withdrawals that I didn't remember making. $200 here, $300 there. They totaled almost $2,000 in 2 months. "I don't know, Robert. Maybe at the grocery store, at the market." "Mum, nobody spends $2,000 on food in 2 months, living alone. This doesn't make sense." He was right. It didn't make sense, but I couldn't explain it. That's why I'm telling you that you need help managing your money. I'm going to talk to the bank so they can give me access to your account. That way I can monitor your expenses and make sure no one is stealing from you." Stealing? Who would steal from me? "Mom, there are a lot of bad people in the world. Exploiters who notice when an older person is vulnerable." Vulnerable. Another word that stabbed my chest like a knife. But I let him do it. I let Robert go to the bank and put his name on my account, because a part of me was starting to believe that maybe I did need help, that maybe I was losing my mind. Robert's visits became more frequent and longer. Now he would arrive and stay for hours, checking the drawers in my house, moving things from their place, saying he was organizing so that everything would be easier for me. "Mum, these photographs are collecting dust. I'm going to put them in a box." "No, Robert. Those photographs have been on that wall since we moved here." "But they make the living room look outdated. And besides, it's not good to be looking at pictures of Dad all the time. It keeps you living in the past." He took the photographs off the wall one by one. Richard smiling. Robert as a baby. Our wedding. 30 years of memories put into a cardboard box that Robert took to his car. I'll keep them at my house so they don't get damaged here. When he left that afternoon, I stood looking at the empty wall in the living room. The marks where the photographs had been hanging were lighter than the rest of the paint, like rectangular ghosts that showed what had been and no longer was. Mrs. Henderson no longer spoke to me. When I saw her on the street, she walked faster and pretended not to see me. The market vendors also started treating me differently, slower, as if I didn't understand simple things. "How much is the pound of tomatoes, Mr. Johnson?" $4, Mrs. Sterling." 4. He spoke to me as if I were deaf or foolish. One morning, while waiting for my coffee in the kitchen, I remembered that Robert had brought me already made coffee in a cup from one of those modern coffee shops the day before. "So you don't have to make coffee, Mom. This is tastier, and you don't have to bother with the coffee maker." I had drunk it out of courtesy, even though it tasted like cardboard and nothing compared to my usual coffee. But that morning, as I looked at my old coffee maker on the stove, I realized I hadn't used it in 3 days. When had I stopped making my own coffee? When had I started letting Robert decide what I should drink, what I should eat, what I should have in my own house? I poured myself coffee in my porcelain mug with blue flowers. I drank it slowly, feeling the warmth of the liquid go down my throat. It tasted like home. It tasted like Richard. It tasted like all the years I had spent in this kitchen, preparing breakfast for my family. While drinking that coffee, I stayed still, listening. There was no sound, only the silence of the empty house. A silence that used to seem like peace, but that now began to feel like isolation. I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window. A 60-year-old woman with greying hair, with wrinkles around her eyes and mouth, still with clear and awake eyes, still standing, still alive. When had I started feeling like a ghost in my own house? That afternoon, Robert arrived with more bank papers. "Mum, I have to give you some bad news. Your pension is not going to be enough to keep this house. The costs of electricity, water, property taxes, everything is going up. And you don't have any income besides the pension. I've lived on that pension for 2 years, Robert. It's perfectly enough." It was enough, but things change, prices go up, and you're spending more than you think. That's why you need to sell the house and move to a smaller place, or even better, you could live with me. The idea of living with Robert filled me with a cold terror I couldn't explain. "I don't want to sell my house, Robert. This is the house I built with your father." "But Dad isn't here anymore, Mum, and you can't keep clinging to a house you can no longer afford." That night, lying in my bed, in the room I had shared with Richard for 30 years, I realized something. Robert never asked what I wanted. He only told me what I needed to do, what I should sign, what I should sell, where I should live, and I had accepted everything without a fight. I had signed papers without reading them well. I had let him take my photographs. I had allowed him to put his name on my bank account. I had let him convince me that I was the problem. I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen in the dark. I took my porcelain mug with blue flowers from the shelf. I ran my fingers over the crack Richard had glued so carefully. The mug had broken, but someone had loved it enough to repair it. Did I not deserve that same opportunity? The opportunity to be broken and still be worthy of care, of love, of respect. Something inside me began to wake up. A small voice, buried under layers of doubt and manipulation, whispering a truth that I had been denying for months. My son wasn't taking care of me. My son was controlling me, and I had let it happen because I was afraid. Afraid of being alone, afraid of being a burden, afraid of admitting that my own son might want to harm me. But that night, standing in my dark kitchen, holding that broken and repaired mug, I made a decision. I was going to start writing everything down, not just in my private notebook, but also in places where Robert might find it. I was going to leave evidence. I was going to protect myself, because I had a feeling that something worse was coming, and I wasn't wrong. As I write this from the hospital bed, as I am writing in my heart now, I think of that city where you are, listening to me. I think about how sometimes we are so alone, each one in our corner of the world, sharing the same wounds. If you can, write the name of your city in the comments. I want to know where the person who is giving me their time, their ear, their compassion is. Because this that I am telling you is not just my story. It is the story of so many mothers, so many women who trusted too much. I started looking for the papers I had signed. One morning after Robert left, I checked the filing cabinet where Richard kept all our important documents. The house deed was still there, in its usual yellow folder. But when I looked for the copies of the will and the power of attorney that I had signed, I couldn't find them. Robert had taken them all. I called the bank. A young woman answered, speaking with that cheerful and professional tone they use in call centers. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "This is Elizabeth Sterling. I want to know who has access to my account." There was a pause. I heard the typing of a computer. "Mrs. Sterling, according to our system, you authorized Mr. Robert Sterling to have complete access to your account 3 weeks ago. He can make withdrawals, transfers, and inquiries without your authorization." My heart sank. Complete access. I thought it was only to check the balance, not to make withdrawals. "No, ma'am. The document you signed gives him full powers over the account. Is there a problem?" No, thank you." I hung up with trembling hands. That $2,000 that had disappeared from my account in the last few months, it hadn't been me who spent it. It had been Robert. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to process what I had just discovered. My son was stealing from me. My own son was taking money out of my account without telling me anything. And the will? What else had I signed without realizing it? That afternoon, when Robert arrived, he brought prepared food again, turkey with gravy in a plastic container. "So you don't have to cook today, Mum. I know you've been tired." I looked at him differently, trying to see on his face some sign of guilt, of remorse. But I only saw that smile that no longer seemed affectionate, but calculating. "Thank you, son." I ate the food even though I wasn't hungry. Robert sat across from me, watching me eat as if he were evaluating every bite I took. "Is it good?" "Yes, very good." "I'm glad. This restaurant belongs to a friend of mine. They make special food for seniors, soft, easy to digest." Food for seniors, as if I were an invalid old woman who couldn't chew properly. After eating, I started to feel dizzy again, that same sensation as the last time, as if the room were slowly spinning. "Do you feel all right, Mum? You look pale." "I feel a little dizzy." "You should lie down. I'll stay here for a while to make sure you're okay." I went upstairs to my room with slow steps. My head was spinning. I lay down in bed and closed my eyes. But I could hear Robert downstairs, moving around the house, opening drawers, moving things. When I woke up, it was already night. Several hours had passed. I went downstairs carefully, still feeling weak. Robert was gone. But the house felt different, as if someone had been searching for something. I checked Richard's filing cabinet again. The house deed was no longer there. My heart started pounding hard. I checked all the drawers in the living room, the dining room, the kitchen. Nothing. Robert had taken the deed to my house. That night I called a number I found in Richard's old yellow pages. A lawyer. I needed to talk to someone who would tell me what to do. The secretary told me that the consultation cost $150 and that I could go the next day at 11 o'clock in the morning. I accepted. The next morning, I dressed carefully. I put on a blue dress that Richard always said looked nice on me. I pinned my hair back with a clip that had belonged to my mother. I wanted to look dignified, sane, capable. The lawyer's office was in an old building downtown, near City Hall. I climbed 3 floors on narrow stairs that smelled of dampness and old paper. Attorney Mr. Black was a man in his 50s, with thick glasses and a neatly trimmed grey beard. He received me in a small office full of books and stacked files. "Tell me, Mrs. Sterling, how can I help you?" I told him everything. The papers I had signed without reading well, the money that was disappearing from my account, the deed that Robert had taken, the strange things that happened in my house. the feeling that I was being manipulated. Attorney Black listened in silence, taking notes in a yellow notepad. When I finished speaking, he took off his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief, looking at me with an expression that was half compassion, half concern. Mrs. Sterling, what you are describing to me is called financial abuse. It is a crime. Your son is using legal documents to take control of your assets without your true consent. But I signed those papers. Yes, but if you signed under pressure, without fully understanding what you were signing, or if your son manipulated the situation so that you would sign, that can be legally challenged. A spark of hope ignited in my chest. What can I do? The first thing is to get copies of all the documents you signed. We need to see exactly what access your son has. Afterward, we can go to the bank and revoke his powers over your account. We can also invalidate the power of attorney if we prove it was fraudulently obtained. And the deed to my house? Those are more complicated. If your son has the physical deed, technically he can't do anything with it without your signature. But if he has a broad power of attorney, he could try to sell the property claiming that you are incapacitated. That's why it's urgent that we act fast. He explained that he needed $150 for that day's consultation, and that if I wanted him to represent me, the total cost of the case would be approximately $3,000. It was almost all I had left in savings after the withdrawals Robert had made. I need to think about it, I told him. Don't take too long, Mum. The more time passes, the harder it will be to regain control of your assets. I left the office feeling dazed. I walked aimlessly through the downtown streets, passing street vendors, old churches, colonial buildings that had seen centuries of stories go by. I sat on a bench in City Hall Park, watching people go by, families with children, dating couples, old people feeding pigeons, everyone living their normal lives while mine was falling apart. How had I gotten to this? How was it that a woman who had raised a son, who had worked for years as a teacher, who had built a life with a good man, was now sitting in a public square, trying to decide whether to spend her last savings to defend herself from her own son? When I got home that afternoon, Robert was already there, waiting for me in the living room. "Where were you, Mum? I called your phone 3 times. I went for a walk." "For a walk? Where to?" "Downtown, to walk through the streets." He looked at me with that expression that was already familiar to me, that mix of disapproval and false concern. "You shouldn't be walking downtown alone, Mum. It's dangerous. You could be mugged. They could take advantage of you." "I've lived in this city all my life, Robert. I know how to take care of myself." "Oh yeah? And why did you go downtown? What did you have to do there?" My blood ran cold. How did he know I had gone downtown specifically? I had only told him I went for a walk. "How do you know I went downtown?" Robert smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile, but one that let me see that I had made a mistake by asking him that, a mistake that showed him I was starting to suspect. "Mrs. Henderson saw you get on the bus that goes downtown. She called to let me know." Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor whom I had considered my friend for years. Now she was Robert's spy. "Did you go to see a lawyer, Mum?" The question hit me like a bucket of cold water. "What? No, why would I see a lawyer?" "I don't know. You tell me. Is there something you want to tell me?" We stared at each other in silence. He knew I was starting to discover his lies, and I knew that he knew. "I didn't go to see any lawyer, Robert. I just went for a walk." "All right, Mum. I believe you." But his tone of voice said the opposite. That night, after Robert left, I checked the whole house looking for the deed. I knew I wouldn't find it, but I needed to do something. I needed to feel like I had some control over the situation. In the drawer of my dresser, I found something I hadn't seen in months, my address and phone book. I opened it and flipped through the pages full of names written in Richard's handwriting. Relatives, friends, co-workers. Most no longer lived in the city. Some had died. Others had simply lost touch with us over the years. But there was one name that caught my attention. Jane, my younger sister. She lived in Boston. It had been more than a year since we last spoke. We had drifted apart after Richard's death. Not because of any fight, but simply because life had taken us on different paths. I dialed her number from the kitchen phone. It rang 5 times before she answered. "Hello? Jane, it's Elizabeth." There was a pause. "Elizabeth? Sis? What happened? Are you okay?" Her voice sounded surprised, but also genuinely concerned. And that real concern, without ulterior motives, made me break down. I started to cry. There, standing in my kitchen, holding the phone with both hands, I cried as I hadn't cried since Richard's death. "Jane, I think I need help. Tell me, what's going on?" I told her everything. The documents, the money, the deed, the manipulation, the lawyer. Everything I had been keeping inside for months came out of my mouth in a river of words, broken by sobs. Jane listened without interrupting. When I finished talking, her voice sounded furious. "That scumbag! That damn scumbag! Elizabeth, you have to leave that house right now. Come to Boston with me. We can hire a lawyer here and fight this from afar." "I can't leave my house, Jane. This is my house. And what good is the house if your own son is stealing from you? If he's manipulating you?" She was right, but I couldn't leave. Leaving meant accepting defeat. It meant letting Robert win. "Give me a few more days," I told her. "Let me see if I can fix this." "Elizabeth, please don't wait too long. Children who do these things can go very far, farther than a mother wants to imagine." Those words stayed with me after I hung up. How far could Robert go? That night I went to bed with my porcelain mug with blue flowers on the nightstand. I looked at it in the darkness, seeing how the moonlight came through the window and made the repaired crack shine. Richard had glued it because he loved me, because for him, I was worth the effort of repairing the broken. Had Robert ever seen me that way, as something worthy of care, of protection, of repair? Or did he only see me as an obstacle between him and the money Richard and I had saved during a lifetime of work? I fell asleep with those questions swirling in my head. And when I woke up the next morning, I knew something had changed in the house during the night. The notebook where I wrote down everything I did during the day, the notebook where I wrote my doubts and my suspicions, was no longer in the drawer of my dresser where I kept it. Robert had been in my house while I slept, and he had taken my notebook. The discovery that Robert had entered my house while I slept filled me with a terror I had never felt before. It wasn't the fear of a stranger. It was the fear of someone I had brought into the world, who I had nourished with my body, who I had held in my arms when he cried as a baby. I checked all the locks in the house. They were all intact. Robert had used his key, the key he said I had given him, but which I didn't remember ever giving him. That morning, I didn't have breakfast. I sat in the kitchen with my empty porcelain mug in my hands, looking out the window toward the garden where Richard's rosebush was blooming with white roses. White roses had always been my favorite. Richard knew it. That's why he had planted that rosebush specifically. Every spring, when the roses opened, I felt that Richard was still taking care of me from wherever he was. But now, looking at those white flowers moving in the wind, I wondered if Richard would be disappointed in me, if he would be sad to see how I had allowed our son to treat me like this. The phone rang. It was Robert. Good morning, Mum. How did you sleep? Fine. That's good. Hey, I need you to look for some papers. They are some documents for the life insurance Dad had. I think they're in the filing cabinet. A knot formed in my stomach. Richard's life insurance. It had been a small policy for $10,000, which I had collected after his death. That money was in a separate savings account, an account Robert didn't know existed, or so I had thought. I don't know what papers you're talking about, Robert. Mum, don't play dumb. I know Dad had life insurance, and I know you collected it. I need to see those documents. What for? Because I'm your son, and I have the right to know what assets you have. Now that I have power over your accounts, I need to have all the complete information. All the complete information. As if my savings, the money Richard had left me so I could live peacefully, were information that my son had the right to demand. Those papers are private, Robert. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was no longer the worried voice of the loving son. It was something colder, more calculating. Mum, I don't know what's been going on with you lately. You're very distrustful, very strange. Yesterday I spoke with Mrs. Henderson, and she told me that you've been acting weird, that sometimes she sees you talking to yourself in the garden late at night. I talk to your father. I always have. That's not normal, Mum. Talking to dead people is not normal. I think you need to see a doctor, a psychiatrist. The word psychiatrist dropped like a bomb between us. I'm not crazy, Robert. No one said you're crazy, but you clearly need help. And as your son, it's my responsibility to make sure you get it. He hung up without saying goodbye. I stayed sitting there, still holding the phone, finally understanding what was happening. Robert didn't just want my money. He wanted to have me declared incompetent. He wanted a doctor to certify that I was crazy, that I couldn't take care of myself, so he could have total control over everything Richard and I had built. And he had been preparing the ground for months, telling the neighbors I was doing strange things, convincing people that I was losing my mind, creating a history of strange behavior that he could use against me. For the first time in months, everything made sense. The food he brought me that made me feel dizzy, the objects that appeared in places where I hadn't put them, the doors that were open in the morning. It had all been him, manipulating my environment to make me doubt my own sanity. I got up and went straight to the phone. I dialed Jane's number again. Jane, I need you to come. Please, I need you now. My sister arrived 2 days later. She took the bus from Boston and appeared at my door with a small suitcase and an expression of determination on her face. Show me everything, she said, as soon as she walked in. I showed her the empty filing cabinet where the deed had been. I showed her the bank statements with the withdrawals I hadn't made. I told her about the will and the power of attorney I had signed without fully understanding. Jane checked everything with a critical eye. She had been a legal secretary for years before retiring. She knew about documents, procedures, and laws. This is serious, Elizabeth, very serious. Your son is committing several crimes: financial abuse, fraud, possibly even forgery, if he manipulated any of these documents. What can I do? First, we're going to the bank together tomorrow first thing. We're going to revoke all the powers you gave him. Afterward, we're going to the public registry to request certified copies of your house deed. He might have the originals, but he can't do anything with them if you act fast. That night, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. Knowing that Jane was in the guest room, that I wasn't alone, that someone believed me and was helping me, gave me a peace I had forgotten existed. But the next morning, when I woke up, Jane wasn't in her room. I went downstairs calling her. Jane? Jane? I found her in the living room, sitting on the sofa, drinking coffee with Robert. My son had arrived early, using his key, and had convinced my sister to sit down and talk with him. "Good morning, Mum. Look who arrived as a surprise. Aunt Jane." Jane looked at me with a strange expression, something between apology and confusion. "Elizabeth, Robert has been explaining the situation to me. I think there's a misunderstanding." My heart sank. "Misunderstanding? Jane, he's lying to you." Robert smiled. That smile I already knew so well, the smile of the predator who knows his prey has no escape. "I was telling Aunt Jane that you've been very confused lately, that sometimes you forget things, that you mix up the facts. That's why I've been trying to help you with your finances and your documents, to protect you." "Jane, don't believe him. I explained everything to you yesterday. The withdrawals, the deed." "Elizabeth, calm down," Jane told me, with that soft voice used to speak to someone who is agitated. "Robert showed me the documents. Everything is in order. You signed those papers voluntarily. There's your signature, your fingerprint, the lawyer's seal." "But I didn't understand what I was signing. He pressured me." "Mum, nobody pressured you. You were perfectly conscious when you signed. Attorney Smith can confirm it." I realized at that moment that I had lost. Robert had gotten ahead of me. He had known I would seek help, and he had gotten to Jane first, convincing her that I was the problem. "Robert suggested something that I think makes sense," Jane continued, looking at me with a mix of compassion and pity that broke my heart. "He says you should go see a doctor, have some tests done, to rule out any health problem that might be affecting your memory." "I don't have any health problem." "Then there's no problem going to the doctor, right? Just to be sure." Robert got up from the sofa and approached me. He put a hand on my shoulder with a gesture that to any observer would seem affectionate, but which made me feel like he was marking me as his property. "It's for your own good, Mum. We just want to take care of you." Jane stayed 2 more days, but we no longer talked about lawyers or revoking powers. Instead, she spent the time tidying my house, cooking meals that she said were more nutritious for me, and talking with Robert about care options for me. When she left, she gave me a long hug at the door. "Take care, sis. And please, go to that doctor. If it turns out everything is fine, we'll all be more at ease, including you." I watched her get into the taxi that would take her to the bus terminal. My last hope for help was moving away down the street, convinced that I was a confused old woman who needed medical supervision. Robert waited until the taxi turned the corner to speak. "See, Mum, nobody is going to believe you. Everyone can see that you're confused, that you need help. You did this. You told Jane things before I could explain to her. I just told her the truth, that my mother is having memory problems and that as a good son, I'm trying to help her. And the money you've taken out of my account, is that also helping me?" "That money is for household expenses, Mum. For electricity, water, gas. You don't realize how much things cost. $2,000 in 2 months is not just electricity and water expenses. Well, there are also the medical expenses that are coming. The doctors you're going to have to see, the tests. All that costs money." He looked me directly in the eyes when he said that, and in that look I saw something that chilled me to the bone. My son had already decided my future. He had already planned how he was going to declare me incompetent, how he was going to take control of everything, how he was going to lock me up somewhere where I couldn't complain or ask for help. "I have an appointment for you next week with a geriatrician, a specialist in memory problems in older people. He's going to evaluate you and tell us what's best for you." "I'm not going to any doctor." "Yes, you are, Mum. Because if you don't go voluntarily, I'm going to have to look for other options, options you won't like." Are you threatening me? I'm protecting you. From yourself. He left after that, leaving me alone in my house, which felt less and less mine. That afternoon I sat in the garden next to Richard's rosebush. The white roses were in full bloom, filling the air with their sweet perfume. "Richard," I whispered, "I don't know what to do. Our son, our son has become someone I don't recognize." The wind moved the branches of the rosebush, making some petals fall onto my hands. "If you were here, what would you tell me? What would you do?" But Richard wasn't there, and I was alone, facing a battle I didn't know how to fight. I went into the house when it started to get dark. I made myself some tea in my porcelain mug with blue flowers. I held it in my hands, feeling the heat seeping through the ceramic. The repaired crack was still there, visible but firm, a reminder that something could break and still be useful, still be beautiful, still have value. Maybe I was broken too. Maybe Robert had managed to shatter my trust, my peace, my sense of security. But I was still here. I could still hold this mug. I could still think, decide, resist. The question was, for how much longer? That night, before going to bed, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took out a piece of paper and an envelope from a drawer and wrote a letter. A letter addressed to no one in particular, but to anyone who might find it if something happened to me. I wrote everything. The documents signed under pressure, the disappeared money, the manipulations, the veiled threats, Robert's plans to have me declared incompetent. I wrote my truth in my own handwriting, signed and dated. I hid the letter inside a book in my dresser, 100 Years of Solitude, Richard's favorite book. If something happened to me, if someone ever checked my things, maybe they would find that letter. Maybe someone would know the truth. I went to bed that night, feeling like I had planted a small seed of resistance in the world, a seed that might never grow, but at least it existed. I didn't know that letter would be found much sooner than I imagined, and that the words I wrote that night would be the difference between life and death. The appointment with the geriatrician was scheduled for a Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Robert arrived early to pick me up. I had spent the night before without sleeping, turning over in my head what I was going to tell the doctor. Would I tell him the truth about what Robert was doing? Or would the doctor also be on my son's side, convinced that I was a confused old woman? "Ready, Mum?" I didn't answer. I just picked up my purse and left the house. Dr. Taylor's office was in a private clinic in the Midtown neighborhood. It was a modern building, with shiny marble floors and ornamental plants in every corner. Everything smelled of disinfectant and money. In the waiting room, Robert sat next to me and took out his phone. While he checked his messages, I looked at the other people waiting. Older people, accompanied by their adult children, all with that same resigned expression that I probably had too. "Mrs. Sterling," the nurse called from the door. Robert got up with me. "I'm going in with her," he told the nurse. "The doctor prefers to do the initial evaluation alone with the patient, sir. You can come in afterward." I saw a flicker of irritation on Robert's face, but he nodded and sat back down. I followed the nurse down a long hallway to a spacious office. Dr. Taylor was a man in his 40s, with dark hair combed back and thin-framed glasses. He greeted me with a professional smile. "Mrs. Sterling, welcome. Please sit down." I sat in the chair across from his desk. He opened a folder and began to review some papers. "Your son called me last week to tell me about your situation. He said that you've been having memory problems, forgetting things, confusing dates, having unusual behaviors." "My son is lying." Dr. Taylor looked up from his papers and looked at me with renewed interest. "I beg your pardon?" "My son is lying." I don't have memory problems. What I have is a son who wants to take my house and my money, and he's trying to convince everyone that I'm crazy so he can have me declared incompetent. The words came out of my mouth with a clarity that surprised even myself. No tears, no hysteria, just the truth, spoken calmly. Dr. Taylor leaned back in his chair and observed me for a long moment. "Those are very serious accusations, Mrs. Sterling." "I know, and they are true. Do you have proof of what you are saying?" "My son has taken $2,000 from my bank account without my permission. He has a key to my house that he says I gave him, but I don't remember giving it to him. He took the original deed to my house. He made me sign documents I didn't fully understand. And he's been telling the neighbors that I behave strangely to create a history he can use against me." Dr. Taylor took notes in a notepad as I spoke. "Have you tried to seek legal help?" "Yes, but my son found out and convinced my sister that I am the problem. No one believes me because he has been very careful to build a narrative where I am a confused old woman who needs help." "And how do you feel now at this moment? Confused?" "No, I feel scared. I feel alone. I feel betrayed by my own son. But I am not confused, doctor. I know perfectly well what is happening." Dr. Taylor closed his notepad and took off his glasses. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm going to do some standard cognitive assessments, memory exercises, attention, reasoning. Do you agree?" "Yes." For the next hour, the doctor asked me all kinds of questions and gave me exercises, remembering lists of words, drawing a clock set to a specific time, subtracting numbers by 7 from 100 downward, naming objects, following complex instructions. I answered everything correctly. I knew it because I saw Dr. Taylor's expression as he wrote down my answers. When we finished, he clasped his hands on the desk and looked me directly in the eyes. "Mrs. Sterling, your results are completely normal. There is no indication of cognitive decline or memory problems. Your mental clarity is intact." I felt a wave of relief so strong that I almost burst into tears. "Are you going to tell my son?" "I am going to talk to him, yes. But first, I want to ask you something. If what you have told me is true, why do you continue to live with your son, having access to your house? Why don't you change the locks? Why don't you revoke the powers you gave him?" "Because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what he might do if I confront him directly." "And why is that?" "Because he is my son. Part of me still wants to believe that maybe there's a misunderstanding, that maybe he genuinely believes he's helping me." "Do you believe that?" I stayed silent. Then I shook my head. "No, not anymore." "Mrs. Sterling, listen to me carefully. If what you have told me is true, you are in a situation of abuse, financial and psychological abuse. And that kind of abuse tends to escalate. It doesn't get better. It gets worse. What can I do?" "You can file a report. You can seek help from the authorities. You can change the locks on your house today and revoke all the powers you gave your son. I can give you a medical report certifying that you are in full possession of your mental faculties. That document can help you legally. And if he says that you are lying, that I manipulated you into writing that?" "I write what I see and what I professionally evaluate. And what I see is a 60-year-old woman, lucid, coherent, with no signs of cognitive decline." He handed me a folder with several papers inside. "This is your report. Read it. And think very carefully about your next steps, because, Mrs. Sterling, time is not on your side in this situation." When I left the office, Robert immediately got up from his seat. "So, what did the doctor say?" "He wants to talk to you." Robert went into the office with that confident smile he used when he was sure he was in control. He came out 15 minutes later with a completely different expression. Angry, tense. We didn't speak on the way back home. The silence in the car was thick, menacing. I held the folder with my medical report against my chest as if it were a shield. When we arrived at my house, Robert turned off the engine, but didn't get out of the car. The doctor said you're fine, that you don't have any memory problems. Because I don't have any. Or maybe you're smarter than I thought. Maybe you fooled him. I didn't fool anyone, Robert. I simply answered his questions honestly. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him before. Pure hatred. There wasn't even the attempt to feign concern or affection anymore. What did you tell the doctor? I told him the truth. The truth? And what is your truth, Mum? That your son is trying to steal from you? That he's manipulating you? Is that what you told him? I told him that you've been taking money out of my account without permission, that you took the deed to my house, that you've been manipulating situations to make me seem confused. Robert slammed the steering wheel so hard that I jumped. Do you know what the problem is, Mum? You're an ingrate. I've taken care of you my whole life. I gave you a college degree to brag about. I visit you. I worry about you. And this is how you repay me, accusing me of being a thief. Robert, I paid for your college with the money your father and I saved for years. I worked double shifts when you were a teenager to be able to pay your tuition. You haven't given me anything. I gave everything to you. And so what? Are you going to charge me now for being your son? I'm not charging you anything. I just want you to let me live in peace, to stop manipulating me, to give me back control over my own life. You know what, Mum? You're right. I'm going to let you live in peace. Completely in peace. So much peace that you'll be able to think very carefully about everything you just told me. He got out of the car, and so did I. We walked toward the front door. I took out my key to open it, but Robert got there first with his. Go inside, he said to me. Something in his tone of voice put me on alert, but I went in anyway. It was my house. I shouldn't have to be afraid of my own son in my own house. I was wrong. As soon as I crossed the threshold, Robert forcefully pushed me inside. I stumbled and fell to my knees on the living room floor. Robert, what are you doing? I'm going to teach you what happens when a mother slanders her son. He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the kitchen. I tried to resist, but he was much stronger than me. Robert, you're hurting me. Hurting? You don't even know what hurting is yet. He pushed me toward the pantry. It was a small room at the back of the kitchen where we kept the cans, grains, and preserves. It had a wooden door with a bolt on the outside. You're going to stay here until you learn not to go around telling lies about me. He shoved me into the pantry. I fell among the cereal boxes and bags of rice. I tried to get up, but he closed the door before I could get out. I heard the sound of the bolt sliding shut from the other side. Robert, Robert, open up. When you understand that I am the only one who takes care of you, the only one who worries about you, then I'll let you out. You can't lock me in here. Yes, I can. This is my house now, Mum. Or it soon will be. I heard his footsteps moving away. I pounded on the door with all my strength. Robert, please let me out. There was no answer. I kept hitting the door until my hands hurt. I screamed until my voice broke. I cried until I had no more tears left. Finally, I let myself fall onto the pantry floor, surrounded by cans and bags, in almost total darkness. Only a thin line of light came in from under the door. I heard Robert moving around the house, opening drawers, moving furniture, looking for something. Then I heard the front door close, the sound of his car starting, the silence. I stayed there, in that dark pantry, trying to understand how I had come to this, how the baby I had held in my arms, to whom I had sung lullabies, whom I had nursed when he was sick, had turned into someone capable of locking me up as if I were an animal. I didn't know how much time had passed. An hour? 2? There were no windows in the pantry. I had no way of knowing. I was thirsty. So thirsty. There was a water faucet in a corner of the pantry, connected to a small utility sink where I sometimes washed kitchen rags. I crawled over and turned the faucet on. The water came out warm and with a slight metallic taste, but I drank it desperately. Then I fell back to the floor, exhausted. What now, I thought. How long did Robert plan to leave me here? Days? Weeks? Would anyone come looking for me? Mrs. Henderson? Jane? But Robert had already thought of that. He would tell them I was travelling, that I had gone away to rest for a few days, that I was fine, and everyone would believe him, because he had built his story of the worried son so well that no one would doubt his word. In the darkness of that pantry, surrounded by the aroma of cinnamon and coffee that had once seemed like comforting, homey smells, and that now smelled of confinement, I understood something fundamental. I had lost. Robert had won, and I was completely alone. The first day in the pantry was the hardest, not because I was hungry yet. There were enough cans of beans, tuna, and canned vegetables around me, and I had water from the sink. The problem wasn't the food. The problem was the silence. The absolute silence that made me hear every heartbeat, every breath, every thought circling in my head like a caged animal. Where was Robert? Would he come today? Tomorrow? Or did he plan to leave me here until I begged for forgiveness, until I signed any paper he put in front of me just to get out of this confinement? I tried to open the door by pushing with my whole body. Nothing. The bolt was old but sturdy. Richard had installed it years ago, when Robert was a child, to prevent him from getting into the pantry and eating candy before dinner. We never imagined that same bolt would be used for this. I sat on the floor with my back against the wooden shelves. I closed my eyes and tried to calm down, to think clearly. Robert would come back eventually. He had to come back. He couldn't just leave me here forever. Or could he? A terrible thought crossed my mind. What if he didn't come back? What if his plan was to leave me here until... No, I couldn't think about that. I had to keep my sanity. I had to believe that I would survive this. I spent hours trying to find something I could use to force the door. I searched through the boxes and bags for something sharp, something strong. I found an old can opener, but it was too small to serve as a lever. The light coming in from under the door started to change. It became dimmer. It was getting dark. A whole day had passed locked inside. That night I slept on the pantry floor, using a bag of rice as a pillow. The concrete floor was cold and hard. Every time I moved, something hurt. My back, my knees, the arm where Robert had grabbed me so hard that he had left bruises. I dreamed of Richard. We were in the garden again, as in the previous dream. But this time we weren't planting the rosebush. We were sitting under its shade, drinking coffee in the porcelain mugs. We did something wrong, I told him in the dream. We did something wrong with Robert for him to turn into this. Richard shook his head. No, Elizabeth. We gave him love. We gave him everything we had. But we cannot control who a person chooses to be. That was his choice, not our fault. I woke up with my eyes full of tears. The second day was worse than the first. Robert didn't come. The house was silent. Only the normal sounds of an old house could be heard. The pipes, the wind, the creaking of the wood. I started to feel thirsty again. I drank more water from the sink. It tasted increasingly metallic, but it was the only thing I had. I tried to eat something. I opened a can of beans with the can opener I had found. I ate them straight from the can. cold and without salt. They made me nauseous, but I forced myself to eat because I knew I needed to keep up my strength. What was Robert saying outside? Had he already told the neighbors I was traveling? Would anyone ask about me? Would anyone miss my presence? Mrs. Henderson might notice that I wasn't watering the plants, that the garden was starting to look neglected. But if Robert told her I was traveling, she would believe him without hesitation. Jane wouldn't call for another week or two. And when she called and couldn't reach me, Robert would tell her I was fine, that I had just stepped out. Dr. Taylor, he was my only real hope. He knew the truth. He had listened to me. He had given me that medical report. Where was that report? I had left it in my purse when Robert shoved me into the pantry. He had probably already found it and destroyed it. On the third day, I lost track of time. I didn't know if it was day or night. The light coming in from under the door was always the same, dim and yellowish, because it came from the kitchen where we never turned the lights completely off. I started to feel sick. My head hurt constantly. I felt dizzy when I stood up too quickly. My lips were cracked from dehydration, even though I kept drinking water. The water. Something was wrong with the water. It had a strange taste, more than metallic, almost bitter. I stared at the sink faucet for a long time, trying to figure out what was bothering me. And then I understood. Robert had been coming. At night, when I slept exhausted, he would enter the house silently. Was he making sure I was still alive and putting something in the water? No, that was too much. That was paranoia. The confinement was making me imagine things. But what if it wasn't paranoia? What if he really was putting something in the water to keep me weak, so I wouldn't have the strength to scream or try to escape? I stopped drinking the water from the sink, just a sip a day, the minimum to survive. On the fourth day, or what I believed to be the fourth day, I started talking to myself. Calm down, Elizabeth, I told myself. Someone will come. Someone will notice. I talked to Richard again. Do you hear me, my love? I know you're not here. I know you left 2 years ago. But I need to believe that somehow you can hear me, that I'm not completely alone. I talked to the rose bush in the garden, which I couldn't see but knew was there, on the other side of the pantry walls. Are you still blooming, or have you withered without my care? My voice sounded strange in that small space, raspy, weak. And then I heard something, a sound in the house. Footsteps. I stood up so fast that my vision blurred. I grabbed the shelves to keep from falling. Help! Help! I'm here. I'm locked in. The footsteps approached. They stopped in front of the pantry door. Hello, Mum. It was Robert. Robert, please let me out. I've learned my lesson. Please. Did you learn your lesson? What lesson, Mum? That I shouldn't accuse you of things that aren't true, that you only want to take care of me. I don't believe you, but it doesn't matter. I didn't come to let you out. I came to bring you something. I heard the sound of the bolt. The door opened a crack. The kitchen light came in like a blinding flash. I closed my eyes, already used to the gloom. Robert stuck a hand in with a glass of water. Take it. You must be thirsty. I didn't take the glass. I just looked at it with suspicion. What did you put in it? What? Nothing. It's just water, Mum. Are you paranoid now, too? I'm not going to drink anything you give me. Robert laughed, a soft, almost tender laugh, which was more terrifying than any scream. Suit yourself, but you're going to get dehydrated. And when you're so weak that you can't even speak, I'm going to have to take you to the hospital. And there I'm going to tell them that I found you like this because you refused to eat and drink, that you are having a psychotic episode. that you need to be admitted to a psychiatric hospital. My worst nightmare. Locked up not just in this pantry, but in a mental hospital where no one would ever believe me. Robert, why? Why do you hate me so much? I don't hate you, Mum. I'm just tired of waiting. Waiting for what? For you to die, like Dad did. But you're more resistant than I thought. So I decided to speed things up. The words came out of his mouth with a coldness that paralyzed me. You're going to be here a few more days, until you sign a document I've already prepared. A document where you say you want to sell the house and that you authorize me to do all the paperwork. When you sign that, I'm going to take you to a nursing home, where you'll be very well taken care of. And I'm going to sell this house and finally have the money I deserve after having endured being your son for 60 years. I gave you everything, Robert. Everything I had. You didn't give me anything. You gave me obligations, a burdensome mother, a mediocre father, a middle-class life that I didn't ask for. I deserved more than that. He closed the door before I could answer. The bolt slid back into place with a sound that had become terribly familiar. I stayed there, standing in the darkness, holding the words my son had just said. And at that moment, something changed inside me. The sadness I had felt for days, the despair, the fear, all of that transformed into something different. Clarity. Robert wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to have a moment of remorse where he realized what he was doing. He wasn't going to open the door because he decided I had suffered enough. If I was going to get out of here, it had to be through my own means, or I had to wait for someone else to find me. But who would come? I thought of Dr. Taylor. He had seen my clarity. He knew something wasn't right. Would he follow up on my case? Would he find it strange not to hear from me? I thought of Jane. She would call me eventually. What if Robert told her I was travelling? Would she believe him again? I thought of Mrs. Henderson, the market vendors, all the people who had been a part of my daily life for years. Would anyone notice my absence? I sat on the floor again and closed my eyes. I thought about the letter I had hidden in Richard's book. 100 years of solitude. If someone ever checked my things, they would find that letter. They would find my truth written in my own handwriting. But when? When would they check my things? After Robert achieved what he wanted. After I was in a nursing home or a psychiatric hospital. Or worse. I couldn't think about that. I had to maintain hope. I had to believe that someone would come, because the alternative was giving up. And after 60 years of life, of work, of raising a son, of loving a husband, of building a home, I wasn't going to give up now. I wasn't going to give Robert that satisfaction. I crawled to the corner where I kept the cans I had already opened. I found a can of peaches in syrup. I ate them slowly, savoring each piece of sweet fruit. The sugar gave me a little energy. Then I drank a sip of the water from the sink. Just a sip. Enough to keep me alive, but not so much that anything Robert might have put in it would affect me too much. I curled up in my corner, using the bags of rice as a makeshift bed. And I waited. I waited as I had waited my entire life. I waited as I waited when Robert was a baby and cried at night. I waited as I waited when Richard worked late. I waited as I waited every time life put an obstacle in my way. With patience, with dignity, with the hope that eventually, somehow, things would get better. I didn't know that my wait was about to end. I didn't know that at that very moment, someone had noticed my absence, and that that person was about to change everything. I don't know how much more time passed, maybe hours, maybe another full day. I lost count. Time had become something fluid, shapeless, meaningless. Only the now existed. The pain in my body, the thirst that burned my throat, the hunger that had already turned into a dull emptiness in my stomach. I was lying on the floor, half asleep, half conscious, when I heard voices outside the house. At first, I thought I was imagining them, that my mind, weakened by dehydration and confinement, was playing tricks on me. But the voices grew louder. Someone was knocking on my front door, insistently. I sat up with difficulty. My muscles protested. Everything hurt. Mrs. Sterling? Elizabeth Sterling. It was a man's voice I didn't recognize. I tried to shout, but my voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Here, I'm here. No one heard me. I heard more voices, more than one person. They were talking among themselves, arguing about something. Then I heard a sound that filled me with desperate hope. The main door of the house opening. Someone had forced their way in. Footsteps, several pairs of footsteps entering my house. Check all the rooms. The call said she might be in danger. I started banging on the pantry door with my hands, with my feet, with everything I had. Here, I'm here, help me. This time my voice came out louder, loud enough. The footsteps ran toward the kitchen. There's someone inside there. Ma'am, is that you? Yes, it's me. I'm locked in. My son locked me in here. Step away from the door. We're going to force the lock. I crawled backward, moving as far away from the door as I could in that small space. There was a loud bang, then another, the sound of splintering wood, and then the door burst open. The kitchen light rushed in like an explosion. I closed my eyes, blinded. When I managed to open them again, there were 3 people standing in front of me. 2 uniformed police officers and a man dressed in civilian clothes with an ID badge hanging from his neck. My God, one of the officers whispered. They saw me there, on the floor, among empty cans and bags of food, with my hair disheveled, my clothes dirty, my lips cracked, trembling. The man with the badge knelt beside me. Mrs. Sterling, I'm Social Worker Jones from the Elder Protection Services Agency. Can you tell me how long you've been in here? I don't know. 3 days, maybe 4. I lost count. Who locked you in here? My son, Robert Sterling. The police officers exchanged glances. We need to get her to the hospital immediately, one of them said, speaking into a radio. Requesting an ambulance at... Everything started moving very quickly after that. The paramedics arrived. They checked me right there on the pantry floor. Dangerously low blood pressure, severe dehydration, signs of malnutrition, bruises on my arms. They put me on a stretcher. As they carried me out of the house, I saw my garden. Richard's rosebush was still there, with its white roses, although some had withered without my care. My plants. Don't worry about that now, Ma'am, one of the paramedics said kindly. We need to take care of you first. In the ambulance, they gave me an IV. The cold liquid entering my veins made me tremble, but it also made me feel more awake, more present. How did you find me? I asked. Social Worker Jones, who had gotten into the ambulance with me, explained. We received a call from Dr. Taylor, the geriatrician, who evaluated you a few days ago. He said that you had been to your consultation, that he had given you a report certifying your mental clarity, and that he was worried because your son had said unsettling things during the evaluation. The doctor tried to call you several times at your home to follow up, but no one answered. When he called your son's cell number to ask about you, Mr. Sterling told him that you were travelling. That seemed strange to the doctor, considering that you had just been in his office a few days earlier and hadn't mentioned any trip. Furthermore, he remembered the accusations you had made about your son, so he called us to request a wellness check. Tears began to run down my cheeks. Dr. Taylor, a man who had seen me only once, who had listened to my story when no one else believed me, who had trusted his professional instinct, he had saved my life. When we arrived at your house and no one answered, but the neighbors told us that your son's car had been parked there for several days, we obtained authorization to enter, the social worker continued. And we found you. Where is my son now? We don't know yet, but there is a search warrant out. When we find him, he will be arrested. We arrived at the hospital. They took me straight to the emergency room. More doctors, more nurses, more questions. They hydrated me with more IV fluids, did blood tests, checked my bruises, took photographs of the injuries for evidence. A young female doctor with her hair pulled back in a ponytail examined me carefully. Mrs. Sterling, in addition to severe dehydration and malnutrition, we found something else in your preliminary analysis. There are traces of benzodiazepines in your blood. Do you take medication for sleep or anxiety? No, I have never taken anything like that. The doctor and the social worker exchanged a meaningful look. It's possible that your son was administering sedatives to you without your knowledge. That would explain the dizziness and weakness you mentioned. The water. Robert had put something in the water. My instinct had been correct. Am I going to be okay? Yes. With hydration and rest, you will recover. You were very lucky, Mrs. Sterling. A few more hours, and the consequences could have been much more serious. They left me alone in a hospital room. I had an IV in each arm, a monitor beeping next to me, a window through which the daylight entered. Freedom. I could see the sky. I could breathe air that didn't smell of confinement. I cried. I cried as I hadn't cried in days. I cried for everything that had happened, for the betrayal, for the fear, for the loneliness. But I also cried out of relief. I had survived. 2 days later, while I was still recovering in the hospital, social worker Jones came to visit me again. Mrs. Sterling, I have news. I sat up in bed, preparing myself for whatever he had to tell me. We found your son. He was arrested this morning. He is being processed for several charges: kidnapping, false imprisonment, elder abuse, financial fraud, and administration of controlled substances without a prescription. The district attorney is requesting preventive detention, so he probably won't be released on bail. I waited to feel something. Sadness, perhaps, or guilt for having caused the arrest of my own son. But what I felt was peace. We also recovered the deed to your house. He had it stored in his apartment along with other documents, and we found this. He handed me a folder. Inside was my letter, the letter I had hidden in Richard's book. They had found it when they conducted the investigation at my house. Your written testimony along with Dr. Taylor's report, the blood tests showing the sedatives, the photographs of your injuries, and the fact that we found you locked up, build a very solid case. Your son will face serious consequences for what he did. And my documents? The power of attorney? The will? A judge has already issued an order suspending all the powers your son had over your assets. You regain total control, and if you wish, you can start a process to annul those documents, arguing that they were signed under duress. I want to do that. I want to annul everything. We will help you with the process. After the social worker left, I stayed looking out the window of my room. I could see a patch of blue sky, some white clouds passing slowly. I thought about Robert, in the cell where he would now be, alone, facing the consequences of his decisions. I didn't feel joy about it, but I didn't feel guilt either. He had chosen his path. He had chosen greed over love, money over family, control over compassion, and now he was paying the price. It hadn't been me who punished him. It hadn't been revenge. It had simply been life, that natural balance of cause and effect that Richard always called karma. The bad things we do come back to us, he had told me once. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they always come back. Robert had sown manipulation, abuse, betrayal, and now he was harvesting loneliness, arrest, public shame. 1 week later, I was discharged from the hospital. Social worker Jones helped me return to my house. They had changed all the locks. Only I had the keys now. When I walked in, everything was the same as I had left it, except for the pantry door, which was splintered where the police had forced it open to get me out. I stood in front of that broken door, looking at the dark space where I had spent the worst days of my life. "Do you want it repaired?" the social worker asked. "No, I want it completely removed. I don't want that door to exist anymore." 2 days later, carpenters came. They removed the door and the frame, covered the space with drywall, and painted over it. The pantry still existed, but now without a door, without a lock, with no way to confine anyone ever again. Mrs. Henderson came to visit me one afternoon. She arrived with a chicken casserole and a look full of guilt. "Elizabeth, I didn't know. If I had known what Robert was doing to you—" "You did know, Sally, or at least you suspected, but you chose to believe him instead of believing me. He told me you were sick, that you needed help. I thought he was being a good son. Good sons don't lock their mothers in pantries." Mrs. Henderson looked down, ashamed. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." I looked at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to be angry with her. Part of me wanted to blame her for being Robert's spy. But I also understood. Robert had been very convincing. He had manipulated everyone. I had been his main victim, but not the only one. "It's okay, Sally. Thank you for the casserole." Jane came from Boston the following week. She walked into my house and hugged me so hard that my still sensitive ribs hurt. "Forgive me. Forgive me for not believing you. Forgive me for letting that monster convince you that I was on his side. It's over, Jane. It's past. How can you be so calm? You almost died. Your own son almost killed you." "I know, but I'm alive, and he's where he needs to be." "Aren't you angry? Don't you want, I don't know, revenge?" I shook my head. "Revenge doesn't bring peace, Jane. It only brings more pain. Robert is already paying for what he did. The legal system is taking care of that. I just want to get back my life, my house, my peace of mind." Jane stayed with me for a week, helping me sort through the papers, revoke all the documents Robert had made me sign, and regain control of my bank accounts. The bank returned some of the money Robert had stolen. Not all of it, but enough. Dr. Taylor also came to visit me. He arrived one afternoon with a bouquet of white flowers. "Mrs. Sterling, I am so glad to see you well." "Thanks to you, I'm alive, Doctor. I just did the right thing. When you left my office that day, something told me I had to follow up. Your story was too coherent, too specific to be the product of confusion or paranoia. And when your son told me you were traveling, right after seeing you so worried and vulnerable, I knew something was very wrong." "Why did you believe me when no one else did?" "Because I've been evaluating older people for 20 years, and I can distinguish between someone who is genuinely confused and someone who is being abused. You were afraid, Mrs. Sterling, but you weren't confused." I offered him coffee. We sat in the living room, on the sofa where I had sat so many times with Richard, and then with Robert. I used my porcelain mug with blue flowers. The repaired crack was still there, resilient. "What is going to happen to your son?" Dr. Taylor asked. "He will go to trial. The attorney from Elder Protection Services says he will probably receive several years in prison for all the charges. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, abuse, fraud. They are serious crimes. And how do you feel about that? I thought about the question. How did I feel? Sad. Sad because I once believed that my son loved me. Sad because I don't know at what moment the baby I held in my arms became someone capable of doing that to me. But also relieved. Relieved to know that I wasn't crazy, that it wasn't my fault, that everything I suspected was real. Dr. Taylor nodded with understanding. Psychological abuse is one of the cruelest forms of violence because it makes the victim doubt their own reality. You were very brave to resist that manipulation, to maintain your clarity despite everything. After he left, I stayed sitting in the living room with my empty mug in my hands. I had survived, not just the physical confinement in the pantry, but the psychological confinement that Robert had built around me for months. I had recovered my house, my money, my freedom, but more important than all that, I had recovered something that Robert almost took from me: my self-trust. My certainty that I knew how to distinguish between truth and lies, between true love and manipulation disguised as care. And at that moment, standing in my garden in the afternoon sun, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. 6 months have passed since those dark days in the pantry. 6 months since the police forced that door and found me there, broken but not defeated. 6 months since my life changed forever. Now, sitting in my garden this spring afternoon, with Richard's rosebush blooming beside me, and my porcelain mug with blue flowers resting on the wrought iron table, I can say that I am at peace. It hasn't been easy. I won't lie and say that everything magically fixed itself when Robert was arrested. The healing has been slow, painful, full of nights where I woke up believing I was still locked in that dark room. But I am here, alive, free. And that is more than many women in my situation can say. Robert's trial ended 2 months ago. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison for kidnapping, false imprisonment, elder abuse, financial fraud, and unlawful administration of controlled substances. 8 years where he won't be able to harm anyone else. I didn't go to any of the hearings. Social worker Jones represented me. He told me it was better for my healing not to see Robert, not to hear his attempts to justify himself or to blame me. He was right. They told me that during the trial, Robert cried, that he asked the judge for forgiveness, that he said he had only acted out of financial desperation, that he never truly wanted to harm me. Lies until the end. Because when someone locks you up for days without enough food or clean water, when they drug you to keep you weak, when they plan to steal everything you have and lock you up in a nursing home forever, that person does want to harm you, all the harm possible. I don't feel sorry for him. Maybe that makes me a bad mother. Maybe a good mother should forgive, should visit him in prison, should maintain the hope that one day he will truly repent. But I am not that mother. Not anymore. I spent 60 years being the mother who puts her son first, the mother who forgives everything, the mother who sacrifices without limits. And it almost cost me my life. Now I am a woman who has learned that love does not mean allowing abuse, that being a mother does not mean being a martyr, that I have the right to protect myself, even if it means protecting myself from my own son. My house is quieter now. I changed all the locks, as I said. I installed a new alarm system. But more than that, I changed the energy of the place. I hired a painter and painted all the walls new colors. The kitchen, which was yellow, is now light blue, like the sky. The living room, which had that old wallpaper Richard and I put up 30 years ago, now has a soft peach color that makes me smile every time I walk in. I bought new furniture, not much, because my savings don't allow for great luxuries after everything Robert stole. But I did buy a new armchair for reading by the window, and a new kitchen table, round and light wood, where I now eat breakfast every morning without the weight of the memories. The photographs that Robert had taken, I recovered them. They are back on the living room wall. Richard smiling on our wedding day, me as a young teacher with my students. I even left one photograph of Robert as a child, no older than 5, smiling as Richard carried him on his shoulders. Because that child existed, that child was real. And I cannot erase all those years just because the adult he became decided to betray me. I keep those memories with affection, but also with clarity. The Robert I loved, the child I raised, died a long time ago. Maybe he never really existed. Maybe he was always like this, and I didn't want to see it. It no longer matters. I no longer waste time trying to understand why my son became who he became. There are questions that don't have satisfactory answers. Mrs. Henderson and I have slowly rebuilt our friendship. She comes over to drink coffee with me on Tuesdays. We no longer talk about Robert. We talk about the plants, the weather, the neighborhood gossip. A few weeks ago, she confessed something to me. Elizabeth, I did notice that something strange was happening. I saw that Robert was coming over very often. I saw that you stopped going out so much, that you looked thinner, sadder, but I preferred not to get involved. I thought they were things between mother and son that were none of my business. I understand, Sally. Sometimes it's easier to look the other way than to get involved. But it was wrong. If you had talked to me, if you had asked me if I was really okay, maybe I would have lied to you. Maybe I myself wasn't ready yet to admit what was happening. Don't blame yourself. Robert was very convincing. He fooled me for months. I didn't expect you to see it before I did. Jane calls me every week. She insists that I go live with her in Boston, that it's not good for me to be alone in this house full of memories. But I am not alone. I have my neighbors. I have Dr. Taylor, who has become something like a friend. I have social worker Jones, who stops by now and then to check that everything is fine. And above all, I have myself. And I have discovered that my own company is not so bad. I went back to the market. The first few days were difficult. I felt like everyone was looking at me, that everyone knew what had happened. The story had been in the local newspapers. Sunlocks. 60-year-old mother in pantry for days. But over time, people stopped looking at me with pity and started looking at me with respect, especially the older women. One woman approached me one day at the vegetable stand. "You are Mrs. Sterling, aren't you? The one who reported her son?" "Yes, that's me." "I want you to know that you are very brave. My son also mistreats me. Not as seriously as yours, but he takes my money, yells at me, tells me I'm a burden. I never dared to say anything because I thought no one would believe me, that he's my son, and I must endure it. But after seeing your story, I went to seek help. I've already started the process to protect myself." She hugged me with tears in her eyes, and I hugged her back, feeling that my pain, my story, had served for something more than my own healing. It had served to give another woman the courage to save herself. Dr. Taylor told me that my case had opened important conversations in the medical community about how to detect elder abuse, that there are new protocols in his clinic now to conduct more complete evaluations when there are suspicions. "Your courage in telling me the truth that day saved your life," he told me, "but it is also going to save other lives. Now we are more attentive, more prepared." Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone to see that lawyer that day, if I hadn't written that letter and hidden it in Richard's book, if I hadn't told the truth to Dr. Taylor during the evaluation. I would probably be dead or locked in a nursing home, drugged and forgotten, while Robert sold my house and spent the money Richard and I saved with so much effort. But I made those decisions, small decisions that seemed insignificant at the time, but which turned out to be the difference between life and death. That is something I want you to understand, you who are listening to me, you who may be going through something similar, you who may have doubts about someone who claims to love you but is hurting you. Small decisions matter. That lawyer you almost didn't call, that letter you almost didn't write, that truth you almost didn't tell because you were afraid no one would believe you. Those small actions can save your life, and if no one believes you at first, keep speaking, keep seeking help, because eventually you will find someone who will listen to you. Someone like Dr. Taylor, who trusts their instinct and acts. Don't give up, because your life is worth it, your dignity is worth it, your peace is worth it, even if the person who is hurting you is your own son, or your husband, or your father, or anyone who is supposed to love you. True love does not confine, it does not manipulate, it does not steal, it does not drug, it does not threaten. True love liberates, respects, protects, cares without controlling, and if what you are receiving doesn't look like true love, then it is not love, it is abuse by another name. Now, in the afternoons, I sit here in my garden as I am now. I water the plants, care for Richard's rosebush, drink my coffee in the porcelain mug with the repaired crack, and I think about everything I have lived. The good years with Richard, the mornings preparing breakfast for my family, the afternoons at the market, the quiet nights reading in my living room. But I also think about the lessons I learned in that dark pantry. I learned that I am stronger than I thought, that I can survive things I thought would break me, that my will to live is greater than someone else's desire to destroy me. I learned that it is okay to set boundaries, even with family, that it is okay to say no more when someone crosses a line, that it is okay to protect myself before protecting the feelings of the one who is hurting me. I learned that forgiveness does not mean allowing the abuse to continue, that I can forgive Robert for who he is without having to allow him back into my life, that I can let go of the resentment without letting go of my boundaries. And I learned something that is perhaps the most important thing, that life has a way of balancing things, that actions have consequences, that what you sow, you eventually reap. Robert sowed deception and reaped prison, sowed manipulation and reaped loneliness, sowed abuse and reaped justice. It wasn't me who punished him. It was life itself, karma, as Richard would say, that natural balance that eventually puts everyone in their place. Sometimes people ask me if I will ever write to Robert in prison, if I will try to have some kind of relationship with him when he gets out in 8 years, and the honest answer is, I don't know. Maybe in 8 years, I will have healed enough to see him without feeling fear. Maybe he will have truly changed and deserves a second chance, or maybe not. Maybe I will decide that my peace is more important than maintaining a relationship with someone who tried to destroy me. And it's okay not to know. It's okay to make the decisions when the time comes, not before. For now, I live my life, day by day, morning by morning. I get up with the sun, make my coffee in the coffee maker Richard gave me so many years ago, water my plants, go to the market, cook for myself, read books in my new armchair, talk with Jane on the phone, drink coffee with Mrs. Henderson. They are simple things, things I used to take for granted, but now each one of them is a gift, because I was about to lose them all. I was about to lose my freedom, my house, my life. But here I am, still standing, still breathing, still drinking coffee in my favorite mug while Richard's white roses bloom around me. And if my story can help a single woman open her eyes, recognize abuse before it's too late, Seek help before ending up locked in a dark pantry or something worse. Then everything I went through will have been worth it. Because our stories matter. Our voices matter. And when we speak, when we dare to tell the truth, even when it is painful and shameful, we give permission to other women to do the same. We break the silence that protects abusers. We break the shame that keeps victims quiet. We break the myth that we must endure everything because it is family. No, the family that hurts you does not deserve your silence. It deserves your truth, and it deserves to face the consequences of its actions. So here is my truth, complete and without shame. My son tried to rob me, manipulate me, and he almost killed me, and I survived, and he is paying for what he did. It's not a pretty story. It doesn't have a perfect happy ending where we all reconcile and forgive. Real life is not like that. But it is a story of survival, of dignity, of a woman who refused to be a victim forever, who chose to save herself, who chose to live. And that, in the end, is the most important lesson. Always, always, choose to live, choose your well-being, choose your peace, choose your freedom, even when it hurts, even when it is difficult, even when it means walking away from people you love. Because you deserve to be well, you deserve to be safe, you deserve to be at peace. And no one, absolutely no one, has the right to take that away from you. I lift my porcelain mug and take the last sip of coffee. It is warm now, but still sweet. The repaired crack shines under the afternoon sun. Broken but useful, imperfect but beautiful, damaged but resilient. Like me. Like all of us who have survived what seemed impossible to survive. Thank you for listening to me until the end. Thank you for giving me your time, your attention, your heart. If this story touched something inside you, if it made you think, if it gave you the courage to face your own situation, then share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, with someone who is going through the same thing, with someone who needs to know that there is hope after the darkness. Because stories save lives. Voices save lives. The truth saves lives. And if my voice, my story, my truth can save even one more life, then all of this will have had a purpose greater than myself. May God bless you wherever you are. May He give you courage when you need it, clarity when you are confused, strength when you feel weak, and may He always remind you that you are worthy of true love, of respect, of peace. Do not settle for less. Never settle for less. Until the next story, until the next life lesson, because every day we live, every challenge we face, every battle we win, is a story that deserves to be told, and I will continue to tell mine, for me, for you, for all of us. With love and hope, Elizabeth Sterling.